Welcome to Seas of Change's next episode of OceanViews. We are so excited to be here with Varsha. Varsha, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you do?
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Varsha Yajman. I'm a 19-year-old climate justice and mental health awareness advocate. I currently work as a paralegal at a climate litigation firm, and I also a coordinator at a South Asian climate justice organization.
Wow, I'm actually very excited to hear everything that you have to say. Honestly, like all the stuff you do is very interesting. I find it very interesting. So, obviously you're in school, currently doing law. So that's like a quite a lot of like a big load you have on with obviously school as well as this. So how do you balance everything?
To be honest, I don't think I do. And I think that's something that I've needed to accept as well, that at times you aren't going to be able to make everything work and you really can't do it all. I feel like that's quite a myth that has been created with like toxic hustle culture. So yeah, like during exams, I need to step back. I just actually came out of my exam week and it ended up being really hectic with work and uni as well. And it was draining. So I've had to take like a couple days off now and just like today I haven't really done anything. And I think to me, that's how I'm trying to find my balance. Yeah, it's really not about making it all work because I just don't think that's possible. Life gets in the way sometimes.
For sure, I love that. And I know that we all need some self-care time, especially with, the work that we do. It's stressful, it's a lot of stuff. And law is just, I've heard from Talara and Steph, they both study law. And I am so glad that I'm not, even though it's so cool because it just seems like so much work, but that's amazing. But just out of curiosity, how did you first get into, environmental conservation? Was it kind of like a big moment or a gradual kind of realization?
So my high school sent around this really random link from this organization called the Australian Youth Climate Coalition to join the student climate leadership program that they're running. It was all about like climate justice and like teaching people how to be part of that movement. And I was in year 11. I was kind of like, oh, I could use some friends and like stuff outside of high school. So I just went to the meeting. I applied, got in. And yeah, and I think what really kept me in the movement was the people there, just like seeing a really good and like representative group of people who all had very similar values, and also just realizing how close the climate crisis was to home, because polar bears in Antarctica or the Arctic is not the end of it for sure.
Yeah, obviously, like, getting into it with all these kind of different programs in schools, you get to meet all these new people. And, that's how I also get, met Steph at school and then got into it. It's obviously like, it's more empowering when you like, with like-minded students and teens getting into it. It's a lot less scary as well. So has where you've grown up had any impact on your pursuit of environmental conservation?
I have grown up in a relatively like not impacted area by climate change, to be honest. Like, I live around a lot of greenery, so that's something that I really, really love. And you definitely do see a few trees being cut down every now and then. It's just the norm. But in terms of like bushfires and things like that, I have been super lucky. The only thing is like I've faced floods from time to time because of rain, but that's more infrastructure issues. But I think it's also recognizing the fact that like the reasons that things flood and we're seeing so many more of these crises is because of climate change. And that's been something that's really woken me up as well, because seeing that it impacts like day-to-day life and like whether you choose to park here or there, like put random sentimental crap in your garage, whatever it is, like all of those things do add up in a way. So I can't imagine how difficult it must be for people who actually suffer from the impacts.
Definitely. I think I definitely live in a kind of privileged area where, I live in a hill, so I wasn't really impacted by the recent Australian floods either. So I'm kind of similar to you, and I totally agree in that I'm privileged enough to not see the immediate effects. But, being educated like you and like me, we understand that there are people that are definitely facing the worst of it and might not even be the ones releasing the most emissions, but facing the most effects. So definitely I agree. But just to touch on a bit of your work further, what are the next steps for you and your organization? Do you have any current or upcoming projects?
The next step is really just narrowing down on the fact that we need to be talking about climate justice. And I think this is obviously not going to be like a one day thing, but a work for a few years, I guess. just focusing on the fact that, so the place I work at right now is really trying to amplify South Asian voices in South Asia and in Australia as well. And the fact that countries in South Asia also are impacted by floods all the time, and we never hear about it because of mainstream media and the Eurocentric lens. And also the fact that even in the environment movement, it does have colonial underpinnings at the end of the day. Like, renewables aren't the answer for every country. Like, if you're going to ask a remote community in India that doesn't have electricity to have renewables, that's simply not possible. So kind of shifting that sort of dialogue.
Yeah, I definitely think that's very important to like keep in mind. Like I feel like a lot of people would probably be listening have an eye opener, like even to me. Yes, there's not like it's not available to everybody. Like you got to be a bit more considerate of like different people's circumstances. So definitely like what you're working with and like the people that you're working with, definitely very amazing thing that they're doing. Making people a lot more aware of what's going on. It's obviously COVID is a big thing. How is that, or has it at all affected the way you've been working?
Yeah, COVID had a massive impact just, I think, on the way that people started viewing climate change. Like, it just slipped under the radar. And I think the main thing is like the pandemic is here, but that doesn't mean that climate change has stopped. I think recognizing that climate change still continues despite a pandemic happening is really, really important. And it was hard to kind of come back from the loss of momentum because in 2019, so many people were upset about the bushfires and the government's response, and all of a sudden the pandemic changed that. So now it's really working to build that up again and making sure that people are able to show up to a protest or like to an online action as well.
For sure. I love the way that you talked about how the pandemic actually affected COVID. I never really thought about it that way, that I think maybe I fell into that trap as well, COVID being the biggest thing that everyone's talking about, but then climate change, like kind of underlying threat that no one's really thinking about. But just on to our next question, kind of a more positive spin on things. What has been your most proudest memory or favorite thing that you've done so far?
Oh, okay. That's a really good question. I'd probably have to say the climate strike in 2019 in September 20th. And it was climate brought together like 350,000 people across Australia. We had like 80,000 in Sydney, I think. And like, it was just incredible to see that many people in one place. Like, we were just so nervous about the turnout, and helping organize that was such a nice experience. And I think it really taught me the importance of like just making real connections with people as well, because the variety of speakers and those sorts of things about like who's actually talking about climate justice is so, so important. And yeah, it was just such a lovely turnout.
Yeah, definitely. Like it was honestly so exciting to see. Like I wasn't able to go, but like watching it happen and like seeing people's reaction to it, I was just like this is amazing. Like you guys did such an amazing job organizing it and everything. So obviously that was like a big, pretty, amazing moment. But what have been some of the challenges you maybe have faced and like how have learned from this and overcome it?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges I face is recognizing that there's racism in the environment movement itself. And I think being a person of color, like all that time that I was organizing for school strike, especially in the first 3 years, I guess, that I've been in the movement, I never really talked about being a person of color. It wasn't really brought up. And I feel like that just made like my connection to culture and all of those things even more distant. So really recognizing the importance of my own heritage, so my family's from India, and like recognizing that link has been super important for me. And I think what helped me to do that, and now obviously I work at a South Asian climate justice org, was talking to other people who had similar experiences. So I would say that try and surround yourself with people who are going through similar things if you can. And even if you're like, I didn't really think anybody else was thinking the same thing that I was, but just having that conversation really opened my eyes to the fact that I wasn't alone in feeling imposter syndrome or anything like that. It was literally just the color of my skin that made me feel like that a lot of the time, which I can't do anything about and I'm quite proud of. So yeah.
Definitely. And I love how you talked about connecting with others that are experiencing the same thing as us to kind of get that support group. I feel like definitely within the environmental conservation sphere or realm, having other people with the same mindset as yours or with the same experiences as yours really does help, as you touched on. I love how you shared your experience about being a person of color. But in your opinion, how powerful do you believe the voices of youth are?
Oh, I think incredibly powerful. And I just finished working on a youth summit actually, which was talking about bringing youth voices into the room. And we were saying that we need young people on boards and we need young people like in the room with all of these decision makers, because at the end of the day, like a lot of these are really long-term policy decisions that people in parliament are making, and they're not even taking into account people who are going to be living during that time. And it's like it all falls on us at the end of the day and like further generations. So yeah, that I really do believe we have powerful voices. We just need people to engage with us a bit more.
Yes, definitely. Because, obviously we are literally like the future, and like the younger generations coming up as well. Like, we need to teach them and like, keep that movement going. So just our last question, what would be your advice for aspiring change makers?
Just do it. I mean, honestly, there's so much out there, and like obviously sometimes there are barriers of like being in an area where maybe you don't have as many people with the like-minded values as you. But for that, I would say there's the internet, and if you have decent internet access and you can find like a Facebook group or follow an Instagram page and DM them, like there's so many ins into these spaces now, which is amazing. And so many programs that are also accessible to like remote areas and things like that as well. Or like we obviously need to have more, but it's definitely up and coming. So yeah, just do it, and I promise you it might take a while, but you will find your community within that space as well.
I love that advice, and I think that is incredibly powerful and something amazing to leave off on. But unfortunately, that was our last question. But thank you so much for giving us the time and chatting with us about your journey and just some advice for everyone that's watching. I'm sure everyone's very inspired. I know I'm inspired. I definitely think Talara is inspired as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.